My ex threatened to hurt me if I dated anyone after him and followed me to a Halloween party. That night, I watched him hug my new boyfriend. On my way to see my lover at a skyscraper rooftop Halloween party, the elevator door opened and I spotted a monster. Lucas, my ex who injured me so badly I required a blood transfusion. Behind my masquerade mask and thick makeup, I was frozen. As he entered the elevator without looking at me, his ornate outfit felt like armor and a trap. Lucas clicked the roof button and leaned against the wall, browsing through his phone, oblivious that the plague doctor in the corner was me. The historical outfit comprised gloves, a long cloak, and boots that modified my height. The mask covered everything save my eyes. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I felt safer in the elevator with 3 others. A zombie couple was making out in the corner as we walked from the parking garage basement to the lobby. Lucas and I were separated by a Superman-costumed man texting, but I knew that would change as others got off at different floors. More people came on the elevator at the lobby, forcing me into the corner, and Lucas had to move backward to get closer. I smelled his scent from the night he threw me down the stairs for smiling at a male barista. If I wasn't afraid to vomit, his Ryan Blake costume from American Psycho might have been humorous. Cool costume, he observed casually as we passed the 6th level. Despite the disguise, I nodded, not trusting my voice. Zombies left on floor 6. Superman left on floor 10. Lucas, myself, and an elderly witch-dressed woman were alone on floor 14. Jack waited on the roof, perhaps checking his phone and wondering where I was. Our first public event was weeks in the making. Finally ready to reveal our connection. All I could think of was what Lucas said last time we saw him. "If I see you with another man, I'll kill him first so you can watch." The witch left on floor 17. 20 levels later, Lucas and I were alone. My legs were trembling so much I had to lock my knees to stand. "Great party tonight," Lucas commented, skimming his phone. "Should be wild." I nodded again as the floor numbers rose. 19, 20. Under all the layers my outfit was saturated in sweat, and my makeup ran under the mask. Floor 24, 25, and Lucas adjusted his weight, getting closer to me without noticing. I pressed tighter against the wall, recalling how he would fill up space until I had nowhere to go. Each floor made the elevator feel smaller. I remembered Jack's expression when he asked me why I kept my history private, didn't use social media, and always looked over my shoulder while we were out. I promised to explain later, but not tonight. Not like this. Not with Lucas present to witness us. Floor 30. A text buzzed my phone. I recognized Jack without looking, probably wondering whether I was close. If I was okay, Lucas looked at the sound, then returned to his phone. No way I'd grab mine. Was afraid to move. Lucas commented, "You know, you're really committed to staying in character," as we reached floor 32. Shaking my suit, I responded, "Haven't said a word this whole ride." He laughed. That chuckle made me cringe. Usually preceded unpleasant things. I was thinking about what might happen when the elevator doors opened on floors 34 and 35. Lucas saw everything as Jack called out and hugged me. The last male who showed interest in me when I was with Lucas was a nice server who brought me additional bread since I enjoyed their focaccia. Lucas waited until we got home, then held my hand over the stove heat until I swore off flirting. The waiter was dismissed the next week after Lucas called. Floor 37. My whole body shook as I approached. Jack was unaware of Lucas's abilities. Without knowing that he would meet a charming person at this party, I triple-checked every lock and slept with a dagger under my pillow. We reached the roof. I rushed out of the elevator to locate Jack. Lucas left before me. He waved and hugged a bro after exiting the elevator. I stopped in my tracks when I saw who he hugged after exiting the elevator. It was Jack. Jack pointed right at me as the elevator doors closed. Lucas turned, looked at me, and smiled slowly. Requested Reds is on Spotify. See link in description or comments. Jack lighted up as he spotted me and started heading toward me with Lucas beside him, one arm already extending out to bring me into the group. Jack opened his lips to say something, and my body stiffened because in 2 seconds, he would introduce me and Lucas would hear my name, see Jack's arm around me, and know everything. Lucas smiled wider as he examined my costume, moving from the mask to the cloak and back. He was attempting to figure something out. His expression was like when he searched my phone for proof I was cheating, even though I wasn't. Jack grabbed my hand and pulled me forward. He started talking about the plague doctor he'd been warning everyone about. My thoughts begged me to run, but my legs wouldn't. I saw this nightmare unfold in slow motion while party music played and others joked like nothing was wrong. Lucas approached and I smelled his perfume and saw his jaw set. That face he gets before deciding to discipline someone. My fingers pushed through Jack's shirt as I yanked him backward with all my effort, nearly knocking him down. When I said we needed to talk now, my voice was strange and strained through the mask. Jack looked perplexed, but I was already pulling him away from Lucas and toward the roof. Lucas seemed to observe us. I looked back and saw a different smile. He appeared to be solving a riddle and enjoying it too much. Jack asked what was wrong, but I couldn't respond. My throat was constricted and all I wanted to do was escape Lucas before he found it out. We passed a group of individuals costumed as horror movie figures, and I kept my head down, dragging Jack faster, my hands trembling so badly I could hardly hold him. I pulled Jack behind a large heating unit on the building's side to block Lucas. My hands were trembling so much I grabbed Jack's shirt to stand. Under all the costume layers, perspiration ran down my back. Jack stared at me with anxiety and asked again what was wrong with me. I pushed myself to let go of his shirt and breathe, then asked him about the man he was embracing, how he knew him, and where they met. My voice seemed desperate even to me, and I loathed it. I needed to know how severe this was and how far Lucas had gone into Jack's life. Jack seemed even more bewildered and claimed it was Lucas from work, that he was assisting Oliver with a huge client project, and that they'd become friends over the previous few months. He stated Lucas was a terrific man, dedicated, and successful, and they occasionally had cocktails after late meetings. Because this wasn't a coincidence, every phrase impacted me hard. Lucas was more than simply a party guest. He was part of Jack's professional network, connected to Oliver, and I couldn't ignore him. Jack wondered why it mattered and why I was shivering like a ghost. I knew I had 30 seconds to decide whether to tell him everything or get us out of here first. Jack must have seen something in my eyes because he nodded and led me to the main elevator after I informed him via the mask that we had to go immediately, and that I'd explain everything. I grabbed his arm again and pulled him back, fearing Lucas would see us depart. Would see Jack escort me out with his arm around me. Would piece together my identity. Jack stared at me like I was insane. But I could tell he was starting to comprehend that something was seriously wrong, and that I wasn't overreacting to seeing a former date. On the rooftop, I saw a fire escape sign near a service entrance on the other side from Lucas. Instead of running, I pulled Jack that way with my head down and as quickly as I could. A vampire couple came around a corner and nearly hit us. I startled and jumped backward against Jack. He tightened his grasp on my hand and seemed to understand. He realized something was badly wrong, even if he didn't know what. I pushed past the hefty door onto a concrete stairs at the service entrance, which clanged loudly and reverberated across the empty area. I leaned against the cold concrete wall to breathe, body shaking, heart racing, hurting. Jack stood there, troubled but patient, not forcing me to explain but definitely wanting to know what was occurring. Party music blared through the walls as people laughed outside the door. All those regular Halloween sounds sounded odd compared to my dread. Because of the perspiration, my legs were weak and I had to lock my knees to stand. My makeup ran under the mask. Jack almost touched my shoulder but stopped. Maybe knowing that I needed space and was barely keeping it together. I took a few big breaths and attempted to stop shivering sufficiently to explain why we raced away from his work friend like he was dangerous. I asked Jack if Lucas and he were buddies or simply nice co-workers, and he could see I was desperate. Jack described them as pleasant yet distant. Mostly professional, getting cocktails to discuss the project. What was so important that I was shaking over a person from his office? He was trying to figure out why his girlfriend had taken him away from a party and was experiencing a panic attack on a stairway. Part of me wanted to lie about being unwell or having a horrible past with Lucas-looking people. I knew it wouldn't work anymore. Not after my reaction. I let Jack carefully raise my mask to view my face. Sweat was smearing my makeup and possibly streaking my cheeks in black, and I knew my eyes looked panicked and crazy. I watched him analyze my face to find out what was making me so terrified. What made me tremble in a stairway after being delighted about our first public event? He appeared worried and puzzled, but he didn't realize the depth of terror. Lacked awareness that this was more than worry or social discomfort. I forced myself to tell him the truth I'd suppressed since we started dating. My voice broke as I said Lucas had harmed me deeply. I told Jack Lucas was my ex, that he put me in the hospital, threatened to murder everyone I dated after him, and that he didn't know who I was or that we were together. I rushed my words and saw Jack's expression shift as he comprehended them. I saw him move from perplexed to astonished, to angry and disbelieving. The blood transfusion, stairs and stove burner kept coming up in my conversation. All the things I'd never want to say, particularly to Jack, especially on a concrete stairway while Lucas was above us, undoubtedly confused about where we went. I could see Jack was processing everything since his expression changed so quickly. Moving from perplexed, to surprised, to wanting to march upstairs and face Lucas immediately. He opened his mouth and I knew what he would say. I grabbed his shirt with both hands and pushed him closer, urging him to listen and realize that Lucas wasn't just an angry ex but dangerous in ways Jack couldn't conceive. That confronting him will worsen things. Jack's jaw was tense, and I could see he wanted to correct this. But I spoke quickly and quietly, emphasizing that Lucas had money, contacts, and a fury that made regular people appear calm. I was gripping his shirt when I heard footsteps coming down the stairway from above. Heavy boots on concrete stiffened my body. A security guard halted when he spotted us around the bend. He reached for his belt-mounted radio like he was calling for aid. He inquired if we were okay and examined my face, Jack's, and the plague doctor mask I was carrying in one hand. I knew we looked like something awful had happened or was about to happen. Jack quickly said I wasn't feeling good and we were going. Despite shivering as his arm touched mine, his voice was firm. The security guy looked at us again, and I attempted to appear ill instead of afraid, which was easy since I thought I would puke up. Jordan introduced himself and offered to take us to the service elevator to escape the main party area. Because I was used to doing everything alone, his sweet speech made my throat tighten. I thanked him and he nodded and resumed walking, signaling us to follow. We entered a back hallway with concrete walls and exposed pipes through a door I hadn't seen. It was the building's bowels that guests weren't intended to view, not the lobby. Jack held my back without pushing as Jordan moved ahead. I focused on walking instead of wondering about Lucas above us. We saw the roof via a little window. It was a mistake to glance through. Lucas stood near the elevator doors with his phone out, scanning the throng for someone. My stomach fell so severely I stopped walking, and Jack looked at me. Saw Lucas and his hand pressed tighter against my back like he was shielding me even though we were concealed. Lucas presumably texted Oliver about Jack's girlfriend right now, using his calculated approach to determine if the plague doctor who fled was me. Jordan noticed we paused and returned, asked if we needed a minute, and I pushed myself to move since gazing at Lucas through the glass wasn't helping. Jordan gave me a business card from his pocket in the service elevator. Tell me to call building security if I need anything and that he'll note tonight in case of difficulties. I almost dropped the card with shaky hands. I thanked him again, remembering that an official knew something had happened, even if he didn't know the details. Jack and I entered the service elevator, and Jordan held it for a while and advised us to get home safely before closing it. I walked to my car in the parking garage on legs that felt like they might give up. Jack asked again if he might follow me home, but I told him I needed time to think tonight. I got in my vehicle and attempted to put the key in the ignition, but my hands were trembling too much. I had to pause, close my eyes, and perform the breathing exercises my previous therapist taught me, counting to 4 on the inhale and 6 on the exhale, until my hands were steady enough to start the car. I received a text from Jack asking whether I reached my car, and whether he was sure I didn't want him to follow. I replied that I needed to be alone tonight and would be okay, even though I wasn't sure. I drove out of the parking garage and checked my rearview mirror every few seconds, thinking every car behind me was Lucas, even though I knew he was upstairs at the party. I squeezed the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles became white and my fingers hurt. I had to remind myself to breathe every few minutes since my chest tightened from lack of air. I took strange turns and doubled back to make sure no one was following me, making the travel home twice as lengthy. After pulling into my apartment building's lot, I was fatigued and shivering and wanted to be shut in. Before leaving my car, I checked the parking lot for 5 minutes to make sure no other cars had followed me in, then sprinted to my building's door and across the lobby to the stairs since I couldn't bear an elevator. Once I got inside my apartment with all the locks and chains on, I went to my phone and checked every app to make sure my location services were off and my social media accounts were still deleted as they had been for 2 years. I updated my email, banking, streaming, and grocery delivery app passwords. After reviewing my Lucas security checklist, I activated two-factor authentication on anything that didn't already have it. Concrete work stabilized my hands. Something that felt like self-defense instead than running away. I glanced at Jack's number for a while. I needed to tell him everything, but wasn't sure I could say it again. I opened my voice memo app and pushed record, then forced myself to explain the essentials while keeping my voice calm by focusing on facts rather than feelings. I told him Lucas struck me so hard I needed a blood transfusion. About the night he held my hand over the stove burner until I vowed never to talk to another man. Probably when he tossed me down the stairs for smiling at a barista. About his threat to murder me if he spotted me with someone else so I'd have to watch. I explained why I kept my history private. Why no social media. Why I always looked over my shoulder. Why I worked so hard to keep our connection private. I stopped recording and forwarded it to Jack before I could doubt myself or delete it and try again. My hands were still trembling after filming, so I almost dropped my phone when it rang less than 10 minutes later. Jack's speech was controlled, but I could see he was struggling. I said I was okay and safe when he inquired. I locked myself in my flat with all my security measures. After a while, he stated he felt ill that he'd introduced me to Lucas without knowing he'd be friends with someone who'd wounded me so deeply. I told him he couldn't have known since I hadn't informed him, which is why I'd kept my history so secret. He inquired my immediate needs. I responded I didn't know but we should consider calling the cops. There was another long delay before he said it would require a report and formal review. I said that Lucas was never charged because I went away instead of filing charges because I was too terrified to confront him in court or cope with attorneys and investigations. Jack inquired why I hadn't reported it, and I could tell he was confused at how someone could get away with it. I attempted to explain that reporting abuse isn't easy, that I'd been isolated and afraid, and that going to the police would just make Lucas angrier and more dangerous. When Jack informed me Oliver had been pressuring him to join Lucas's initiative, the discussion changed. Jack was meant to attend a large customer dinner next week. After realizing this wasn't simply about avoiding Lucas at random places, my chest tightened and I had to sit on the floor. It was nearly hard to navigate Jack's professional world without him. Jack suggested he could skip the meal, but Alan would think it was odd and hurt his project. I told him I understood, but I expected him to be honest with me about every Lucas encounter from now on. We spent another 20 minutes discussing what this meant for us, and if we could keep dating if Lucas was always at Jack's business. We decided to tackle it day by day and assess our resources before making significant choices. Jack vowed not to mention me at work or tell Lucas about his personal life. After we got off the phone, I opened my laptop and searched Google for domestic abuse options in the city, clicking on websites until I located a free consultation legal advocacy organization. I saved their web page and posted their phone number on a sticky note on my fridge to see it every day. Even though I was afraid to execute it, having a plan made me feel more in control than in the prior several hours. I attempted to sleep that night, but every corridor sound or parking lot car door shutting kept me awake. I was weary and had gritty eyes in the morning. I was also resolved not to be paralyzed by dread. I brewed coffee and waited on my couch until the advocacy organization opened at 9 o'clock. At 9, I called the number and a woman answered on the second ring. I told that I needed help with a hazardous ex who had returned to my life and my voice was steadier than expected. She asked me a few basic questions and booked a consultation for later that week. I added 3 reminder notifications to my phone calendar. Jack texted me mid-morning that Lucas had questioned Oliver about the plague doctor costumed party girl. Oliver explained that it was his cousin visiting from another city, which gave me 5 seconds of peace until Jack said Lucas appeared genuinely intrigued and kept asking what the cousin looked like and if she was single. I read that text 3 times and felt my hand shake again because Lucas was actively researching if the plague doctor was me. I spent the next hour checking every window lock and door chain in my flat twice to ensure security. I was horrified to find that Lucas knew my area since he dropped me off close here when we were dating before I had a car and relied on him for transportation. I never told him my building or apartment number, but he knew the approximate area, probably within a few blocks, which was too near for comfort or safety. I was worthless at work and couldn't focus for more than a few minutes. Sarah, my coworker, asked if I was okay because I looked fatigued and stared into space. I fabricated insomnia and caffeine overconsumption. However, I watched the door every time someone passed our office, almost expecting Lucas to find me here too. I walked to my car to have lunch and saw a black automobile idling across the parking lot with a driver. I observed for 10 minutes while eating my lunch and the automobile didn't move. Sat with the engine running. My hands were trembling so violently that I had to snap 4 photographs before I could see the license plate. I started a new document on my phone and named it Evidence Log, then entered the date, time, location, plate number, and description of the driver through the tinted windows. I felt paranoid and even insane. It seemed necessary, like I was creating a case, even though I didn't know why, or if anybody would take it seriously. I couldn't turn off my apartment lights that night. I slept with my phone charged on the pillow next to me and the knife back beneath my mattress, where it had been for 2 years before I met Jack. I hated being afraid again. Just one elevator encounter had shattered the delicate sense of safety I'd been establishing with Jack for months. The next morning, I traveled to Sophie's office in a downtown office building that appeared like any other, making me feel safer than if it had been designated for abuse victims. Soft seats, periodicals, and a water cooler were in the waiting room. Sophie came out to collect me in jeans and a sweater, not the professional work clothing I expected. She was probably mid-30s. She took me to a small windowed office and locked the door. Then sat across from me with a notepad and waited while I chose where to start. Sophie listened as I started with Halloween night and the elevator, then proceeded backward to explain why seeing Lucas was so horrible, even when I had to pause and breathe through the blood transfusion and stove flame. When I reached Lucas's warning to harm any man I dated, Sophie scribbled and highlighted twice. After I finished talking, she looked up and said, "What I was describing was a clear pattern of domestic violence, and that courts take threats like Lucas's very seriously." Hearing her say it so calmly and professionally made it feel more real, like my fear wasn't just paranoia, but a real threat that others could see. Sophie took out a huge binder and said that I needed to document everything and that even the rooftop encounter qualified as contact, even though Lucas didn't know it was me. She advised me to report the threat and strange automobile to the police. If nothing came of it right now, it would start an official record that may be relevant later. She put down the police station location and a known good case officer. They then went over a safety plan with me, inquiring about my daily habits and vulnerabilities. We spent almost an hour planning emergency contacts, escape routes, and event documentation. Sophie provided me a binder with information sheets, phone numbers, and directions for if Lucas came up at my apartment or business. When I left her office, I held this folder like a shield to my chest. For the first time since the elevator, I felt active instead of hiding and praying Lucas wouldn't find me. From Sophie's office, I drove directly to the police station, without thinking since I'd lose my nerve if I went home first. The station was crowded with people making reports and cops strolling about, so I waited 20 minutes in a hard plastic chair, watching the clock and trying not to second-guess myself. A lady in uniform called my name and introduced herself as Officer Rebecca Lane, then walked me to a tiny private room with a table, 2 seats, and a tissue box. A former partner stalked and threatened me, so I reported it. Officer Rebecca Lane took out a paperwork and asked questions calmly and professionally, making them simpler to respond. She requested precise dates, times, and details, and asked if I had any evidence of the threats. I gave her my phone with the parking lot license plate photo and detailed the Halloween rooftop encounter. Officer Rebecca Lane meticulously filled out the paperwork. When I described Lucas's warning to murder any man I dated, she paused, looked up and asked me to repeat it. She copied everything I said. He questioned whether anybody else had heard him make that threat, and I had to answer it was only us in his flat. She said she had no proof Lucas was in the rental car or knew my address. Not much could be done immediately. But she gave me her direct number on the back of her card and advised me to call if anything else happened, even anything tiny. She also indicated she'd save the report and that it would help take action swiftly if Lucas did anything again. Jack phoned that evening as I was preparing supper or trying to prepare it, primarily looking at the pasta water waiting to boil. He seemed more nervous than normal and informed me Oliver had indicated Lucas was inquiring around the office about Jack's personal life, particularly if he was seeing anybody serious. After Oliver shut it down and shifted the conversation, Jack claimed he could see Lucas was intrigued and kept attempting to bring up Jack's girlfriend. Jack stated Lucas had inquired if Jack was serious about anybody, what she was like, and if Oliver had met her. These seemingly innocent questions that seemed intrusive until you learned the context. Jack's voice showed he was now seeing that this wasn't only about my previous trauma, but about current danger. Lucas was aggressively seeking to identify me. I asked Jack if he would avoid Lucas at work, the client dinner next week, and other situations where they may encounter. Long pause on other end of line. He seemed to be considering how ditching a big project would affect his career and how Alan and their employer would see him. He agreed, saying my safety was more vital than any job or customer. Hearing him say that was extremely relieving. I felt awful since I knew it may hurt him professionally. The next day, I saw my building manager in the security office, a small room with monitors showing parking, garage, and lobby viewpoints. I handed him the license plate photo on my phone and asked if we could examine the footage from that day. He opened it up and we went through hours of blurry footage to find a partial view of the same car in the garage corner for over an hour. The manager noted the date and time and told the front desk personnel to monitor for the car and phone me if it returned. He volunteered to walk me to my car any late-night work session. My building official knowing about the incident made me feel safer, like I wasn't alone. Later that afternoon, Jack sent me screenshots of Lucas's casual queries about Jack's dating life and personality. If Lucas wasn't my violent ex looking for information, these messages would appear regular and nice. Jack's girlfriend's Halloween party preferences were questioned. Another inquired whether she lived close. Each question was framed like Lucas was talking, yet it seemed like he was getting closer. Screenshots were saved to a new phone folder called Evidence and added to the document I began. My hands shook as I put in the dates and times because I could tell. Lucas was eager to find me. That night, I found a tiny arrangement of flowers at my apartment door after work. Cheap supermarket flowers in transparent plastic wrap without a card or note. Instead of calling the police, I took photos of them from every aspect, including close-ups of the flowers, wrapping, and door. I returned to my car and took a plastic shopping bag from the trunk to pick up the flowers without touching them, trembling my hands as I carried them to the garbage behind the building. I threw them away and stood there breathing, trying to calm down enough to walk upstairs to my apartment since I had no proof Lucas had left those flowers, and I couldn't think of anybody else who would leave them without a card. The notion of his knowing my specific address chilled me to the core. After locking myself in my room upstairs, I called Jack to hear his voice and tell him about the roses before I lost my nerve. On the second ring, he inquired whether I unintentionally disclosed my neighborhood to Lucas or Oliver, and I could hear his shame before I described what occurred. I informed him about throwing away the cardless flowers. He waited a long time before asking me to recount every communication he'd had with Lucas or Oliver that included my name or whereabouts. We talked for 20 minutes, with me asking specific questions about what he said and when, and Jack growing defensive before apologizing. Jack ultimately confessed that he had told Oliver that his girlfriend lived in the Arts District 3 weeks earlier, because Oliver had urged him to try a new restaurant there. The words hit hard since the Arts area is only 4 blocks wide, and Lucas could easily find my building with that knowledge and some basic research. I asked Jack to reconsider if he'd stated anything more that may assist Lucas find me. Jack continued apologizing and said he didn't know Lucas was dangerous, therefore it didn't matter. I told Jack I needed to pack a suitcase and stay someplace else for a few days since Lucas could know the neighborhood and I didn't feel comfortable in my flat anymore. Jack offered to let me stay with him, but I said it was too obvious. Lucas would search there if he was pursuing me. I had to go somewhere Lucas wouldn't check. Ava answered my phone with loud music while I was packing my workout bag and stepped outdoors to hear me better. She didn't question why I wanted to rest on her couch for a few nights. She just said to come over and she'd make up the couch with new sheets. Ava's building across town includes nighttime security with cameras and a front desk. I felt safer away from my area, even though Lucas could find me anywhere. I took my laptop, phone charger, and Lucas documentation folder. Before departing, check each window lock again. I watched my mirrors the whole 30 minutes to Ava's, afraid every set of headlights behind me were Lucas's following me to my new hiding position. Ava woke me at 9 p.m. She dragged me inside her apartment without asking questions, pointing to the couch with blankets and pillows and telling me to relax. After I set my bag down and gathered my breath, I told Ava I wanted to rehearse what I'd say in court if I applied for a protection order. She grabbed a paper and pen and sat across from me to listen. I tried to speak the history with Lucas out loud, keeping my voice steady and sticking to the facts like Sophie had advised me, but I kept feeling overwhelmed and hurrying over the scary portions. Ava stopped me twice to encourage me to breathe and calm down, documenting dates and incidents for my statement. We talked for nearly an hour as Ava wrote down my thoughts, starting with the abuse background and ending with the roses at my door. She asked wonderful questions about timings and evidence, helping me determine which aspects were legal and which were emotional trauma that wouldn't convince a court. By the end, I had 3 pages of Ava's handwritten notes, a clear statement structure and a sense of preparedness, albeit I was still afraid. The next morning, Officer Rebecca Lane phoned as I was enjoying coffee at Ava's kitchen table to tell me the license plate I'd photographed belonged to a rental car firm, meaning the driver picked an untraceable automobile. She added this information to my police report and stated the conduct was worsening and that she strongly advised me to file for a temporary protection order since waiting was risky. I thanked her and vowed to get to the courthouse soon, then stared at my phone after we disconnected up since the rental vehicle detail made things feel more genuine and planned. An hour later, Jack wrote that Oliver had indicated Lucas being considered for a promotion with more client-facing responsibilities and greater compensation. I felt nauseous reading those lines while hiding on a rented couch. I felt unjust that Lucas's career was improving while I was displaced from my flat and afraid to travel alone. The fury was so powerful that I resolved to go with the protection order, regardless of Jack's employment position. I used my phone to email Jordan from building security, requesting him to make a brief statement about seeing me agitated in the stairs on Halloween night. Jordan sent me a professionally written incident report within 2 hours, noting the date, time and my evident panic when he discovered me. I put it to my evidence folder, happy that someone official had documented that moment. Sophie said she had time that afternoon to meet with me to put together my court packet once I sent her the incident report. I met Sophie in the Advocacy Center at 3 p.m., and we organized everything on her conference table into a clear sequence of escalating risk. My written statement about the abuse history was first, then Lucas's threat to kill any man I dated, then Jordan's rooftop incident report, then Officer Rebecca Lane's rental car report, then the flowers photo, then Jack's screenshots of Lucas's invasive questions, and finally Jordan's security incident report. Looking at it all in one packet made the risk feel real and recorded, like I was making a case instead of being terrified and worried. Sophie helped me prepare a cover letter stating why I needed the protection order and what limits I wanted. She reminded me that judges regarded threats of violence seriously, especially if abuse was documented. Jack called 11 p.m. that night. Unsettled. He said he was in a pub with workmates when Lucas arrived up and lost his fury at the bartender over getting the wrong drink. Jack said Lucas raged at this young bartender, making the pub go silent, calling him dumb and inept over a mistake regarding whether the cocktail should contain ice. Everyone at the work table looked uncomfortable, and Oliver tried to calm Lucas, but Lucas tossed money on the bar and rushed off, still ranting. Jack recounted me this story with a new voice, like he now got my explanation about Lucas being harmful. That witnessing the wrath firsthand was different than hearing about it. Jack contacted me again the next day to say he was done trying to manage the job issue cautiously and wanted to talk to his employer about the conflict of interest and be removed from Lucas projects. Hearing him say that made me relieved yet worried about his career. I told him to choose his career above my safety if he had to because I couldn't bear the guilt of damaging his job. Jack paused before explaining he'd decided my safety was more essential than any project or promotion. 2 days later, Jack went to Officer Rebecca Lane's station and submitted a formal written statement describing Lucas's threatening behavior at the bar and his persistent questions about Jack's girlfriend, connecting Lucas's violent temper to his interest in Jack's personal life. Officer Rebecca Lane phoned me that afternoon to say she'd added Jack's statement to my case file and that it bolstered my petition by describing Lucas's wrath and his history of attempting to gather information about me. I checked my work email the next morning and felt sick when I noticed a message from an unfamiliar address. A random mix of numbers and letters. When I opened the email, the subject line was blank and the text included 4 words. I miss you. A photo was attached, and I knew not to open it. But my hands clicked before my brain could stop them. Image loaded of my office building from the parking lot. It appears the photographer was sitting in a vehicle at the entrance where I parked every day. I quickly forwarded the email to Officer Rebecca Lane without replying. My hands were trembling so much I had to hold my phone against the desk to avoid dropping it. She phoned me back within 20 minutes and urged me to keep the original email with all the header information to track its origin. Despite her calm, professional voice, I could detect her concern when she inquired if I felt secure coming to work that day. After calling in ill and staying at Ava's apartment, I told her I couldn't focus since Lucas had photographed my office. Officer Rebecca Lane added the email to my case file and claimed it revealed a pattern of spying and intimidation that would bolster my protection order petition. Taking my evidence folder, I traveled to court that afternoon. The documents, images and statements I collected were so dense the folder hardly closed. The file clerk read my petition and set a 10-day hearing, noting the date on a paper and giving me a copy with instructions on what to bring. Can I receive protection sooner than 10 days? If the judge found urgent danger, she suggested I may file an emergency interim order. She sent me to another waiting room where I waited over 2 hours watching legal cases arrive and go. When my name was called, a court officer escorted me into a tiny room where a judge reviewed documents at a desk. She glanced at me and asked why I needed emergency protection. I practiced the basics while maintaining my voice. The blood transfusion, stove burner, death threat, rooftop encounter, flowers, rental vehicle surveillance, Jack's testimony regarding Lucas's wrath, and now the email with my workplace photo. The court carefully examined my evidence folder, looking over each tab and reading the images and statements. After finishing, she glanced at me and stated the emergency interim order was effective immediately. She said Lucas would receive documents instructing him to keep away from me and that any contact or approach might result in his arrest. Relief was nearly tangible. But then came fear over Lucas's reaction to those publications. Using Oliver's knowledge on Lucas's steady training regimen, Officer Rebecca Lane arranged with the sheriff's office to serve Lucas at his gym. The service was 2 days later during his morning session, and I spent the day at Ava's place hardly functioning. I checked my phone every few minutes for a sign that everything went well or that Lucas had erupted and done something awful. Officer Rebecca Lane texted me about noon to say the service was over, and Lucas took the papers without problem. However, the deputy maintained he read them quietly and still. That night, while watching a movie on Ava's couch, my phone buzzed with a notice from an old social media account I'd forgotten I had. The message came from a generic named, photoless profile. 2 phrases chilled me. "This is a mistake and you know it." I screenshotted the message, reported the account to the platform, and emailed everything to Officer Rebecca Lane, who phoned me immediately. She verified that Lucas had been clearly warned not to contact me directly or indirectly, therefore this violated the interim order. She stated she'd document the violation and add it to the complete hearing material, and Lucas might be arrested if he contacted me again. The next afternoon, Ava returned home rattled from errands and informed me she saw Lucas or someone like him across the street from her building. She contacted the police immediately and waited in her car. Officers arrived after the individual was gone. They added her statement to my case file, showing that Lucas had found where I was staying despite my best efforts to leave no trace. Ava's call was answered by 2 police officers who drove by her building and checked the streets for almost an hour. One of them phoned Lucas personally to tell him that they were aware of his being near me and that any further contact would result in instant arrest. I listened to Officer Rebecca Lane tell this story over the phone, and felt both relieved and terrified that he would not be stopped. Jack called that night to tell me that Alan had informed him that HR had investigated Lucas after receiving an anonymous complaint about his workplace aggression. Jack believed the bartender filed the complaint after seeing Lucas's rage over the improper drink. Alan noted that Lucas had been withdrawn from all client-facing meetings during the inquiry, which indicated that his career repercussions were now catching up with him. The next day, Jack wrote on Instagram about domestic abuse awareness without naming individuals but made his point. He blacklisted Lucas on every platform and informed Alan he would never work on Lucas projects again. I was affected by this public support, even though I knew it may cost Lucas professionally and cause issues with Lucas's co-workers. Sophie and I prepared my evidence in a back corner of a coffee shop 3 days before the hearing. She advised me to be cool and remember that the court wanted to hear specific abuse events with dates and facts, not broad remarks about being terrified. She explained the hearing, who would be there, and what would happen in sequence. We rehearsed responding judges' questions. She reminded me to bring tissues because crying was allowed. Showing emotion strengthened my case by being honest and sincere. On hearing day, I wore a basic black dress and cardigan to seem professional. I brought my whole evidence folder with color-coded tabs and highlighters, sorted chronologically with comments on what each document showed. Sophie met me in the courthouse corridor and we sat on a bench to study my statement and highlight critical topics. Before my case was called, she held my hand as I started shaking. Her hold was firm and warm as my body shivered with terror of seeing Lucas again in court. Sophie escorts me inside the courtroom where Lucas sits at a table with his lawyer when my case is called. Despite feeling him watching at me, I keep my eyes on the judge's face. The judge requests my abuse history. I describe the blood transfusion and how Lucas hit me so hard 2 years ago that I required emergency surgery. Even though my fists are gripped so tightly beneath the table that my nails bite into my palms, my voice is stronger than expected. He held my hand over the stove burner until I pledged never to talk to other guys. My last meeting with him included a death threat to harm anyone I dated. The court learns about my Halloween rooftop meeting with Jack, the flowers that came at my apartment door without a card, and the emails from strange addresses stating he missed me. The judge takes notes while I tell about Ava citing Lucas's description outside her building where I was staying. Her expression was focused. My speech is pretty steady despite my body trembling. After I finish, the judge asks Lucas to speak. His lawyer steps up and talks about misunderstandings and coincidences, claiming that the rooftop meeting was merely uncomfortable socializing and that the flowers might have come from anybody. After interrupting him, the court says the pattern of behavior is evident and troubling. She extends the protection order for 1 year and states that Lucas cannot contact me directly or indirectly, cannot enter within 500 feet of my home or office, and cannot question anybody I know about me. Strong relief makes me dizzy. My face is neutral since Lucas is still in the room and I don't want him to notice my fear. Lucas and his lawyer are told by court security to depart through a different entrance to avoid crossing paths in the corridor. Lucas stands up and walks toward a side exit with his lawyer. They close the door and my legs give out. Sophie puts her hand on my shoulder and tells me I did well in there as I sit down hard on the nearest bench. Over the next week, I adjust my work schedule drastically. Instead of Lucas's timetable, I arrive and depart at random times. I join exercise classes at a new gym across town and switch coffee shops from my flat to my office. No one can follow my trend because I buy at a different food store in a different area on various days. Sophie helped me build this plan to move less predictably. Following through with each adjustment lets me feel in control rather than reacting to dread. Jack and I have a long chat about our relationship now that everything is out in the open, and we agree to take things easy and be honest about Lucas's contacts and overlaps. We write a basic agreement that none of us will retain Lucas-related secrets, even if they seem tiny or inconsequential, because those facts kept me safe when I needed them most. Jack will notify me promptly if Lucas contacts him or if Alan discusses Lucas's employment condition, and I will notify Jack of any suspicious incidences or safety plan revisions. I get 8 hours of unbroken sleep in Ava's flat, my first since Halloween. Wake up feeling almost normal for the first time in weeks. Ava cooks pancakes in her little kitchen, and I tell her this is the first morning I haven't woken up with my pulse beating and checked locks or windows first. Ava returns with me to my apartment the next day and we complete a full safety check, including the new locks put while I was with her. To ensure proper recording, we test the hallway security camera. We keep pepper spray near the entrance and on my bedside table. Walking back into my space feels like regaining what Lucas attempted to take from me, and I'm happy I didn't let fear keep me away forever. Jack contacts me that afternoon with word from Alan that Lucas's suspension has been prolonged while HR reviews his allegations and that the huge project Lucas was overseeing has been fully reallocated to a different team. Officer Rebecca Lane contacts me the following day to ensure that Lucas hasn't broken the protection order since the hearing and provides me her number to call if he does. Since the order is in place, she says the first report phase is closed, but she'll keep the case file active in case I need to add anything. Sophie refers me to a domestic violence trauma counselor. I book my intake for next week. Knowing I'll have professional help for the lengthy healing process makes the future less daunting, like I'm creating a foundation for recovery instead of just existing. My new apartment nighttime ritual includes preparing tea in my favorite cup and reading for an hour before bed. It makes me feel comfortable and grounded. I now calmly verify the door lock and check the security camera feed on my phone to ensure my safety. I put the knife back in the kitchen drawer instead than under my mattress. I still hear every hallway sound, but I don't jump at them. In the apartment above me, I hear my neighbors arriving home from work and kids running. I don't panic anymore at typical sounds. The protection order is working, so I don't need to constantly adding to my desk's evidence folder. Jack texts me to inquire how I'm doing, and I say I'm okay and feeling secure again for the first time in years. I open the evidence record on my laptop again and type the last item, timestamp it and noting that the protection order is live. I write that my support network is strong, my boundaries are clear, and I have resources if Lucas attempts anything. A list is crucial to view in the conclusion. Sophie's activism via her office and emergency line. Call Officer Rebecca Lane's cell anytime, day or night. Jack's informed partnership now that he building security contact for Jordan. Understands all and supports me. Ava's question-free zone, including my hefty binder of documentation that I took genuine precautions. Because losing this record would compromise my safety, I save and back it up 3 times. I close the laptop and glance about my flat, taking in the new locks and security measures that make it feel like mine again instead of a hiding spot. Putting the knife back in the kitchen drawer and not checking the window locks for 2 days seems like progress, even if it's tiny. I take out my Halloween plague doctor outfit from my bedroom closet. The long black cloak and beaked mask that masked me effectively that night. A storage box is sealed with tape and placed in the back of the closet behind my winter jackets, after I neatly fold everything. It seems like denying Halloween if I toss it away. But I'm not keeping it visible daily either. I still feel the elevator-induced terror when I think of Lucas. But it comes in fewer waves. Fear no longer guides my choices. He's not locking me in my flat or panicking at every hallway sound. I am learning to be careful without letting it paralyze me and prevent me from living.